Good evening. This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio show. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck. And the restaurant and bar has nightly specials. And Scott, could you please jog my memory?
Be happy to, Dale.
I have a co-host. Our co-host is Scott Hennon. And he's going to help me out with the specials. What are the specials tonight, Scott?
Monday night is BAM night.
BAM night.
Yeah.
What does BAM mean?
Well, BAM is a acronym for a big...
a big-ass mug. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I got it now. I remember.
I was trying to come up with a diplomatic, politically correct description for a BAM mug, but you're right.
A big posterior mug.
Yes, exactly. And anyway, the Mondays, they're buck off, all the BAM beers, and same with all the burgers. And as you mentioned earlier in the program, the North Dakota Beef Cattlemen's Association have actually bestowed a national honor on the Peacock Alley. Every year they pick one Beef Innovator of the Year in the entire country, and that restaurant, think of all the restaurants that serve beef in this country, and the numero uno award winner for this year would be none other than Dale and Melody Zimmerman and the crew here at the Peacock Alley American Grill and Bar.
So in other words, ladies and gentlemen, if you come down to the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck and order a steak or a piece of beef, when they cook it, they know what they're doing. So this is a good quality to have, and certainly something worth spending your money on.
Exactly right, and they're a buck off the beers and the big mugs, and notice I said the big mugs. They are big mugs.
They are like 20-ounce plus mugs.
And a buck off the burgers as well. So we invite you to come on down. We also want to thank our sponsors, including, by the way, the host of the Legislature Today every Monday through Thursday night from 7 to 9, the Peacock Alley, 422 East Main Avenue, downtown Bismarck. Invite our listeners all across the state. Come on down anytime. The Expressway Inn and Suites is our hospitality sponsor, where a good night's rest costs less. And also the North Dakota Chapter of Concerned Women for America, Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, including the North Dakota Rural Electric Cooperatives Association and their members, Minnesota Power and Great River Energy, as well as the Northwest Landowners Association. And, of course, this hour sponsored by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, as well online at ndenergy.org.
And we have with us today from the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties the indomitable Brady Pelton, who is the the Deputy Director of the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, which is, as Scott just mentioned, our sponsor for this second hour of the Legislature Today. We're going to be speaking with some city officials later on in the show, but first I thought we could go through a bit about what the Legislature did today. There were some votes on constitutional amendments in the House of Representatives. One of them whizzed through 93-1. It is a constitutional amendment to ban any sort of real estate tax or real estate transfer tax from being approved in the legislature. Now, North Dakota doesn't have one of these right now, but this constitutional amendment, if it is approved in the Senate now and also then put on the ballot and approved by the voters, that would mean that we would not have a real estate or a real estate transfer tax ban, or we would not have a real estate transfer tax in North Dakota according to the North Dakota Constitution. There were a couple of other proposed amendments that were defeated. One of them would have eliminated the existing prohibition in the North Dakota Constitution of state aid to religious schools, which are referred to in the Constitution as sectarian schools. Now, the word sectarian is a leftover from the 19th century when there was quite a bit of disquiet in state legislatures across the country and also in the U.S. Congress about the idea of providing state aid to new Roman Catholic schools that were being established throughout the country as a part of the wave of Irish immigration that was going on. And the reason for getting rid of this term was presented as a way of getting rid of a kind of a vestige of anti-Catholic bigotry that accompanied the enactment of the original North Dakota Constitution at statehood in 1889. But this proposal failed. It actually deadlocked 47-47 in the House. You need 48 votes in the North Dakota House in order to get something approved, and there was only 47 votes in favor. Now, this could be reconsidered tomorrow. That may happen. I'm not sure if it will. That's always a possibility when you have such a close vote. And the reason that a lot of folks opposed it was because there was some discomfort about the idea of opening up the universe of potential state aid, overt state aid to religious schools, which of course has been prohibited in the North Dakota Constitution, and also there's kind of a tradition in the country against that sort of aid. There was also an amendment to allow for a referendum on acts of the Board of Higher Education. One situation this could apply to would be if the Higher Education Board approved a tuition increase that was not to the liking of a group of folks, a group of students, or whoever. Then they could circulate petitions and put this on the ballot, much as you can any act of the legislature. And this was defeated 71-23. There were also the beginning of the higher education budget dance. The North Dakota University system is composed of 11 public colleges and universities, and representatives for each of them traditionally appear before the House and Senate Appropriations Committees to make their case for a particular spending plan. And this week, the House Appropriations Committee, or actually a subcommittee of that committee that reviews higher education spending, is listening to presentations from the colleges. Today they listened to the University of North Dakota and North Dakota State University, among others, and this will be going on all week. Our primary subject on the second hour of the legislature today, which again is sponsored by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, is about a proposal that refers to hub cities in western North Dakota, which essentially are the larger cities in the state's oil producing area that are supplying a lot of services and workers for the western North Dakota's oil expansion. And we're going to be talking about legislation to distribute state aid to those cities, and essentially how this particular piece of legislation would work, and what our local officials think of it. We're going to start off tonight. On the telephone we have the Mayor of Williston, Mr. Ward Kozer. And Mayor Kozer, welcome to the show.
Good evening, and thank you.
Thank you, sir, for being on. Can you just tell us, how does this hub city concept work, and how does it work in particular for the city of Williston?
Well, it's kind of a new concept, that we talk about the hub cities, and I think it stems from the fact that we have three larger cities that actually bear some of the extra burden for the oil activity. I can speak specifically for Williston in the fact that is kind of the center, the epicenter of what's going on here. We provide, for an example, sewage treatment. We provide, in many cases, ambulance service, not just for our city, but for surrounding areas. And we provide different things that are needed, whether it be water or sewage or different services to the whole oil industry. And so we probably have, I'm not saying that we're more impacted than some of the smaller communities, but we have kind of a unique impact, especially when you look at a community like a Minot, which is not actually in the oil field, but it does provide services to people who work in the oil field and oil companies.
And how there is a bill in the legislature that deals specifically with the hub cities concept, and it allocates money to the hub cities based upon certain factors. Can you tell us about your understanding of how that bill would work, and are you pleased with its structure presently?
Okay, yeah, it's House Bill 1358. We always call it the Scarpel Bill. Representative Bob Scarpel from District 2 is who put this together. He put a lot of time and effort into it. He worked actually with the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. I know he worked with our particular community and tried to determine what a formula might be that would help those communities. In the past we've had energy impact grants. We actually had about $130 million in the last biennium, and those are wonderful, and they help us with infrastructure needs. Those dollars are not able to be used, for an example, for increased police protection or ambulance people, people in public works, just the average worker. And so Representative Scarpel did is put this together, and he based it, the formula that he used, on the percent of people you have working in the oil industry. For an example, in Williston's case, about 39% of our people in town, of our employees, work in the oil industry, and that's going to be different for the different cities. And he had a formula put together that would allocate so many dollars for each percent of employment that you had in there. He also has money in that particular bill for the North Dakota Job Service to look at that whole industry and maybe expand it a little bit. Many times you had people who worked in the oil industry that weren't included by Job Service, and so they're going to review that. I think they have $150,000 in there to do that, and so we would believe, for an example, where right now Job Service says we have about 39% of our people working, we probably have closer to 45% when you take truck drivers and some other workers in that industry, and we really liked what he put together. Excuse me. We had worked with him and were in close contact with him throughout the development of the bill. And as it came through the House with good support, we really like that. It's now in the Senate. There's been some amendments that are giving us a little heartburn, but overall, it's a good plan to get money to those cities who are so heavily impacted by the oil industry.
Mayor Kozer, you mentioned amendments that give you heartburn. What do these amendments do?
Well, the initial formula stated, and I think I'm going to have these figures right, that for every percent of employment you had, you would get $750,000 per year as impact money. And the amendments actually changed that. They kind of front-loaded, so they say your initial percentages get more money for each percent of employment, but as you get higher in the number, like Williston does, you actually decrease that percent. And so, although initially, at the initial glance, it would look like we'd get a couple $1 million more a year, but when Job Service goes through this and they put our employment at, let's say, 45% instead of 39%, it actually would cost us quite a few $1 million over the next 10 years.
So it's like a regressive tax rate.
Right. It's just, and as I looked at it, it's like if you have impacts in your school and you have a few extra students, you can usually handle those few extra students. But if you suddenly start to have dozens of extra students in your classroom, that creates a problem. And so we feel, that as the impact increases, the dollars need to increase. It would just be a different philosophy of how you look at it. And so that's I guess, is what is having us look at it real carefully right now.
Mayor Kozer, do you have any particular problem with the metric that's being used to determine how much money you get in terms of what's being used as the percentage of folks who work in the oil industry? And I imagine that's kind of a number that's hard to quantify exactly.
Right, it is. You had to come up with something, and and I know Representative Scott will spend a lot of time trying to find a good way to look at this. What formula do you use? Is it employment, or is it based on building permits, or is it based on a number of oil companies in your town, or there's just a number of things? And I think he determined that would be a good way to look at it, and we would agree with that. We think, we're not necessarily pleased in Williston to have 40% of our people working in the oil industry. That's actually too many for one industry. We would much rather be more diverse. So that in itself shows the stress that we're feeling and dealing with here, is as that we're really top-heavy with people working in the oil industry right now.
And are you satisfied with the amount of money that you'll be getting if this works out? And also, what would you be using the money for?
Okay. Yeah, we would be pleased. If it went forward as it came out of the House, we'd be very pleased with it. It would give us about $30 million a year for 2 years, the 2 years of the biennium. And we would look to use it for infrastructure, for normal operating expense. Our budget, for an example, from the city increased, like in 2010, our budget was about $48 million. This year in 2013, we're at about $80 million. We have just a huge amount of cost. Keep in mind, not only have we had to double our number of employees in the last few years, we have to pay them more. If you're competing in the oil industry, when you're right in the heart of it, in other words, you have to be competitive. And so we've had to have some pretty substantial pay increases the last few years, add a number of employees. And so all those costs have added millions of dollars just to that line item, just to our salary line item. And we're grasping for ways to do it. And this money go a long ways to help us in that regard.
And so you're having to hire more employees, and you're having to pay your employees more. What else is this money? I mean, this $40 to $80 million increase in the city budget that you mentioned. What else is it going for besides personnel and increased salaries?
Well, another good example, a big chunk of that would go to a new sewage treatment facility. We actually had a good facility that was taking care of us and actually had some extra capacity. Well, suddenly with the tremendous growth that we've had, we need to expand that plant. And that basically is brought on us by the oil industry. It's the people that are not only living in Williston and using our sewage facilities, but those in the surrounding man camps who need a place to get rid of sewage. The area, even some of the surrounding, not just man camps, but actually communities that need a way to get rid of their sewage. And so just in that line item alone, in this next biennium, we're looking at about $40 million that needs to be spent there. So even if we could take $10 million each of those 2 years and put towards that, that would help us. We'll use other things. We'll use fees. We'll use some of our sales tax money, and try to put together a way to fund that. Speaking
of sales tax money, how's that going? Since your Williston is practically the king of taxable sales and purchases in North Dakota, even beats the bejesus out of Fargo.
It's really quite interesting because we're not ahead of Fargo because of our sales at JCPenney's. It's not the retail that's doing it. It's obviously the oil industry. For the last 2 or 3 quarters, we have actually led the state. We had about, I think, over $800 million in the last quarter that was reported in taxable sales. An interesting factor in that is Williams County, which Williston is a part of, actually generated about 28% of all of North Dakota's in-state taxable sales that last quarter. That's coming out of one county. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is when a sale is made outside of the city, let's say that a business in the city sells a piece of drilling equipment or a pipe or whatever to an oil well and it's delivered outside the city, we do not collect city sales tax on it. We collect the 5 cents for the state, but we don't get our penny, our penny for the city. And so people look at that and say, well, you must be rolling in sales tax dollars. No, it's better than it was. We generate now somewhere between probably $12 and $14 million a year from sales tax. But if we were in a town like a Fargo, where it was being generated by the retail sector, we would be many times that in what we'd actually have to keep for ourselves.
Mayor Kozer, one of the things you hear about down here is the rec center that is to be built in Williston, the cost and kind of elaborateness of that, and whether or not that is a good investment when you have other public works needs in the city. Could you just talk about that for a moment, please?
Yeah, I'd sure like to do it because I think it's a great thing that's happening. We're dealing with thousands of young people moving to our town. Young couples in many cases, other cases of single men. Maybe the wife will come at some particular point. And if you want to have them here and you want them to want to become a permanent resident of Williston in the state of North Dakota, you need to make sure that you have a quality of life that appeals to them. We all recognize in this part of the world, we definitely have 4 seasons, and like the weather as it is today, there's not a lot that you do outside. And so the residents of the city, actually Parks and Recreation initiated this, and the residents of our city voted on themselves a penny sales tax. Half of that penny goes to fix up the parks, and half of that penny goes to build this rec center. Now, granted, it's about $75 million, so it should be a very good one. But I think that's the type of thing that we want so that we become the community that the whole state can be proud of. Right now we're going through some real stressful times and dealing with issues of infrastructure and all the things that come with this type of a rapid growth. But we want the day to be there when Williston is looked at as a premier city in the state. And it's one of those cities that when there's a convention going on, even people in Fargo and Grand Forks say, hey, let's go over to Williston. That's a nice place to visit. And part of that is by making sure you have a quality of life here. So I guess I personally am pleased that we're doing it. It's going to be done in about a little over a year, and I think it will be a tremendous asset for the community.
Well, Mayor Kozer, thank you for your time. I do appreciate your being on the phone with us to talk about this Hub City plan. We're going to go next to Mr. Sean Kessel, who is the Dickinson City Administrator. And Mr. Kessel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to ask you about some of the issues that we talked to Mayor Kozer about. Are you pleased with the hub city concept and how it might benefit Dickinson in terms of supplying some state money to help you deal with the effects of oil development in your region?
There's no doubt that the impacts have been tremendous, and so we look to the state to help us through paying for some of those impacts. And the Rural Hub City Grant Program is something that's been very helpful in the past, and hopefully, again, very helpful in the future. So we're looking to try and receive about 20 to 25 million a year to deal with the tremendous amount of impact that we have here in Dickinson.
And are you pleased with how this money is being calculated as the bill is now? It's a percentage of folks that work in the oil industry, and that's used to calculate the city of Dickinson's share of this money. Is that a metric that you think is fair to the city, and do you think that it accurately reflects how many folks in Dickinson are indeed working in the oil industry?
You know, I think if you choose any metric, you're going to have difficulties finding something that is fair and equitable across our whole community, our whole state. So you have to figure out one that you think best represents and can best provide resources to all of the communities involved here. Certainly using that percentage is one of those metrics. Building permits might be another one. There's a lot of them that you could use. And I'm not sure that any of them are any better than one another.
We've been talking to the Dickinson City Administrator. His name is Sean Kessel, and we'll be speaking to him after our break in a moment here. This is the Legislature Today radio show from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, and we're our hour this evening, our second hour, is sponsored by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, and we're talking about a bit of legislation in the North Dakota legislature that uses what's called a hub city concept to aid cities in western North Dakota that have enormous strains on their budgets and public works because of oil industry development, and we're talking about how the state legislature is attempting to aid these folks, and we'll be back after a moment. This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio show from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck. This is the second hour of our show. It is sponsored by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. We're talking to some folks about the effect of a particular bill in the legislature that's intended to funnel some state aid to some of the larger cities in western North Dakota's oil-producing region. We're speaking this evening to the Dickinson City Administrator, Sean Kessel. Mr. Kessel, if I can get off the subject for a little bit, I understand that you made a presentation a few days ago to some big-dollar muckety-mucks in Minneapolis, and I'd like to know how that went and to what extent you do this sort of thing in an attempt to bring outside capital into North Dakota.
Yeah, I've been at two different times while I was in Minneapolis. On Thursday night, it was a group of about 70, and on Friday, it was a group of about 300 or so. I've done that probably half a dozen times in various cities across the United States, and it's amazing to me how many of those people actually show up in western North Dakota. Several people, I would say at least a dozen of them that I've presented in front of have been to our community, to Williston, to Minot, to Watford City, and all around, checking it out and looking for investment. It certainly resulted in housing projects, commercial projects, and even some industrial projects in our community.
And at these presentations, sir, what information are these people hungry for?
They really want to be a part of the Bakken. Everybody's heard about the Bakken. They're looking for ways to identify opportunities. It's so exciting. Our national economy is much different than the economy that we're experiencing in North Dakota, and especially western North Dakota. And so they're looking for places to invest some dollars and try to make a decent return on those dollars. So the presentation that I provide to these groups is actually on the Dickinson's website. If you go to www.dickinsongov.com, you'll find that presentation online and you can view it for yourself.
Outstanding. Can you tell me the money that would be supplied to the city of Dickinson by this Hub Cities bill in the legislature? How much money are we talking about, sir, and what would you use it for?
Well, the growth formula, the percentage they're using, of course, is employment in the mining industry, and that's going to be refined. There's actually dollars in the bill to refine what that really means. And so the second section should mean something slightly different than the end of this section. Our hope is in the end we'll receive around that $20 million mark or somewhere thereabouts. And that money is a drop in the bucket compared to the identified needs that we have in terms of infrastructure, extensions, water, road, water storage. Our one project alone in our wastewater treatment plant is a $48 million facility. So we need far outstripped revenue source, and we still have to make priorities on what we're going to do next.
To what extent has your city budget grown in the last 5 years?
Well, I've only been in Dickinson 4 years, so I can't quite go back that far, but I can tell you that in 2010 is when we really started to feel the brunt of oil impact. And in that year, our budget was $21 million. $19 million of that was operating, and $2 million of that was capital. Our budget in 2012 for the 2013 year was approved at $73.4 million. 38.5 of that operating and the rest capital.
And what's that? Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's a big jump, 200+%. We're aware, but the funds, staff, and so many other expenses that are needed.
And could you tell me some detail about what that money goes for? I imagine you're hiring more employees, you're paying them more. What other needs do you have?
Yeah, we've hired 29 people since 2010 to accommodate. We've doubled our building permit staff. We never had a planner in the city of Dickinson, so we've actually hired 2 planners. Tried to be very strategic in the way we do that, and so we actually contract out half-time of one of our planners to the county and provide services to them. We've authorized, I believe, 8 different police officers, some more fire staff. It affects every single service that a city provides, and so we've authorized staff, I think, in every single area except our museum staff. And you're right when you talk about wages. You can't continue to operate and offer the same wage you did in 2010 because the advantages for the oil field is pay. We actually have people on our solid waste route. They're out collecting garbage. We offer jobs because those people have CDL licenses, and that's a valuable commodity in the oil field. We've actually increased our staff wages on the average about 10% each of the last 2 years.
Is it reaching a point yet, sir, where the growth is leveling off?
Well, we certainly haven't seen that yet. We continue to set records in terms of many of the areas that we study the closest. For instance, building permit issuance. In 2011, we were the 4th fastest growing micropolitan in the United States, and we issued about $145 million in building permits. And that's by far our biggest year. Well, this last year, 2012, we closed the year issuing almost $410 million in building permits. That's 183% change and represents a year-over-year growth that's faster than any other city in North Dakota. So it's not, we don't believe we've seen the peak. Based on the plans that we have at our planning department, we expect that 2013 will actually be a bigger year than 2012.
Well, speaking of building permits, sir, how is your housing situation? I understand, and I think everyone does, that housing is tight in western North Dakota. Is that improving at all in Dickinson and the surrounding area?
I think by the end of this construction season going into next, I think it's improving. We're nowhere near where we need to be. The balance is still heavily weighted toward people needing housing. But for instance, in 2011, again, we issued 137 building permits just for single-family homes. Again, a record for us. In 2012, we issued 589, which led the state again in single-family housing permits. So I think once those all get built, and this year's group of permits, I think that by the end of this year, we'll see an easing of the need, extreme need for housing.
Mr. Kessler, to what extent is the city itself expanding to, take in some of this growth area around its borders?
Geographically, we've annexed several thousand acres over the last 2 or 3 years. We've really taken a different approach to annexations now. It's very expensive to annex on the fringes of your community because you're breaking new ground. You're extending water, sewer, roads, and other infrastructure out to new territory. What we'd rather do is annex some land outside. We'd really like to focus on our core and work out. So we have a request for qualifications out there right now to do a downtown renaissance. We'd like to see our downtown have mixed-use development. I mean, we'd like to see a lot more people living in our downtown area, which will then incent retail and other growth, and then grow out from there. We've taken a good hard look at where NDSU has told us they think our population will be. We know how much land is required to appease that level of population. We think we're pretty close to having that much land inside our city limits.
Aside from residential housing, what's your biggest construction need? And I'm thinking about, do you need more commercial businesses, more restaurants, more clothing stores, that sort of thing?
Certainly. I think if there's one thing that our longtime residents would love to see come out of this boom time is more options when it comes to exactly the things that you mentioned. I think office space is at a premium. That's something we'd like to see. But we're excited to say that Menards has got their building permit application in, so they should start building here in the next month or so. We're getting a new grocery store, a new liquor store, the retail is following, and we're excited that a lot of that will actually begin construction this season, so it'll be available to residents of Dickinson and the surrounding area next year, and that's exactly what our people want.
Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Kessel?
Well, certainly, oil affects, like they say, everything that we do, and we're hoping to be a community that's better on the backside of the boom than we entered it. And we're trying to just completed our comprehensive plan, so we have a plan in place to do exactly that.
Very good. We've been speaking this evening to Mr. Sean Kessel. He is the Dickinson City Administrator and has been for 4 years. We're talking about some legislation in the North Dakota Legislature that would allocate a certain portion of state funds to some of the what are called hub cities in western North Dakota that are bearing a great deal of the brunt of the impact of oil industry development. Thank you, Mr. Kessel, for being with us this evening.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
No problem. Next, we have the city manager of the city of Minot, Mr. Dave Wayne. Mr. Wayne, could you please tell us what you anticipate the effect of this hub city legislation to be on the city of Minot, and also could you describe a bit? I mean, I think most people may not think of Minot as being in the oil patch. And how is it that the city of Minot is affected by oil industry development that's quite a bit further to the west?
Well, it's an interesting question because we don't have many oil wells, many new oil wells at least, that are in Ward County. We have some. But we are relatively close in terms of the distances between Minot and where the oil patch is. You can look 40, 50 miles to the west or 40 to 50 miles to the southwest of us, and we have a lot of folks that are in the partial Newtown areas or over into the Stanley area that are certainly major oil producing areas, and a lot of those folks are choosing to live here. They're choosing to raise their families here. They're choosing to have a lot of the business operations of some of these companies are locating in our energy parks. So it's a wide variety of impacts that we've got as a result of it. But there is I would describe it as a huge impact on our community, and we could cite it in just about any statistic. Look at how we looked pre-energy boom and how we look today. It's a very significant impact to us.
Mr. Wayne, could you tell us about how the Hub City legislation that we've been discussing, which provides some money to the larger cities in western North Dakota based upon the percentage of oil industry workers in their city, in each city, can you tell us how that affects Minot specifically and how you would like it to?
Well, I can tell you that I'm not the politician in our organization, and if the mayor were here, I'd be happier to have him talk about those issues. But I can tell you that, there has been significant discussion about the formula, and if that formula can be modified some to give us an opportunity to have just a little bit more in terms of state assistance. We're having, as I mentioned before, such a huge impact to our community, and the impact to everything from our utility rates to I guess everything else in terms of the expenses to our community.
What sort of modifications are you seeking, sir?
Well, it's the formula that provides the funding based on a percentage. I know that there's been discussions that are ongoing amongst legislators, and I guess I'd leave it at that. It's a matter of seeing if there could be a slightly improved formula that could help us.
How are you managing the effects of the oil development in Minot alongside the flood recovery from the Mouse River flooding of 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, actually?
That's a fair question, because I can tell you that for anybody that works here, and I've got my public works director sitting here with me this evening, but anybody that works here or has worked here or served on our city council, they'd tell you that if we had only energy development, it would be the single biggest thing that had happened in our careers in terms of the impact to the work that we do and the change that it's brought about. But we could also say that about the flood that we had here. It'd be the single biggest thing that we've seen. And two things like that together have made it a very, very interesting place to work, and an awful lot of things that need doing. And so, fortunately, we've got a lot of good people, and we're doing what we can to try to keep the community moving forward from a organizational standpoint.
We're speaking to the Minot City Manager, Dave Wayne. Mr. Wayne, how would you describe the status of the flood recovery presently?
We've got, I think, about 80% of the people who were flooded are either back into their homes or are at a point where they may soon be able to get back into their homes. We have, however, if you were to drive through the community, you'd see significant areas where there's an awful lot of work that needs yet to be done. We're working with the federal agencies that are here to provide assistance in terms of hazard mitigation funding, in terms of the CDBG funding through HUD, hoping that we can get an enhanced funding of CDBG funds to provide additional assistance to the residents with working the program to try to get rules adjusted that would make it, in our view, more fair for the residents. And I say that because the rules as they come down often are if you're low and moderate income, and you have not done the work on your property, you're going to qualify for the program. If you're low and moderate income, but you found an assistance from an uncle or an aunt or a cousin or somebody that lent you money so that you could get your work done, from FEMA's standpoint, you have no unmet needs, and you won't qualify for the funding through the programs that they've got. So there are things in the rules that we'd like to see modified that would add to the number of people that could qualify for some of the assistance. That said, there's been an awful lot of progress. We're continuing to work on future flood control. Obviously, in a year when we have the kind of snowpack that we've got up in this country at least, the anxiety level starts to rise as you get towards the middle of March, and the snowpack really hasn't left us. So I can tell you, though, that everything we're hearing is that the International Service River Board has deemed so far, at least, that we're not in a 1 in 10 event year at this point yet. The future for flood is often what happens in the last part of the winter, and so we're waiting with bated breath and trying to be prepared for anything that happens.
As far as the oil industry is concerned, sir, and its effects on Minot, is it primarily, are people living in Minot and commuting, or are there companies that provide services to the industry that are based there because they, maybe it's a less expensive place to operate than some place closer to the oil patch?
One of the things that we prepared for the legislature, as we talked about the impacts to us, was the number of companies that have been locating in our community. 2012, the number that we have is 53 companies with 2,900 plus employees, and that number has been growing dramatically over the last few years. So, yeah, there are an awful lot of folks that are here, and that it shows up in so many ways. I can tell you that, for example, we're looking to the state to provide some assistance to us on the impact that we've seen to our airport. For 15 plus years, we had enplanements that averaged around 60 to 70,000 per year. In the last 3 years, that number has gone to 224,000 passengers. We now have an airport that was designed, 30,000 square foot airport designed to handle at its maximum about 100,000 passengers. That's way beyond its capacity. And so we're working with the FAA and working with the state trying to get the funding that we need to get to build a new airport terminal that would handle the traffic that's coming in here. And that traffic, it's clearly caused by energy impact. There's nothing else that we've seen over the last 20 years that has had really any impact on us like this.
And how much money, sir, does it cost to build a new terminal?
I think the total for the terminal all by itself is somewhere around $40 million, but the total for the project is closer to $80+ million because there's a ramp that's required and there's other work that's needed in terms of the traffic in and out of the terminal. So it's a pretty significant investment that we're looking at.
Is there federal aid available?
There is some federal aid available, but of course, just like anything else, there always seem to be new rules. When new rules hit us in terms of terminal construction, there's now a cap of $20 million that didn't exist when the other major airports in the state built their terminals. That cap makes it much more difficult to get your project built. That coupled with some of the rules that they have in discretionary funds, once you begin a project, the discretionary funds are available only to a certain extent in any 1 year, even if they give priority to your project. It takes us, if we take a portion of those discretionary funds to start any portion of our project, we will not get any additional federal aid on that portion of the project. If we use federal aid on the terminal, we got $10 million in this year. There'll be no additional federal aid available, discretionary funds at least, to assist on that project in this year. And so it's a balancing act, trying to get a cost share between federal, state, and local funds. We're looking at an investment locally of more than $25 million, and that's about what we're looking to the state to assist us with as well.
Mr. Wayne, how would you describe the community's attitude toward the influx of new oil folks. Do you think that they're being welcomed, or is it something a bit less friendly?
I think it's been very welcome in terms of the impact to the community. Just one example is what's happening in our schools. Our kindergarten enrollment this fall was actually a surprise to us that the school reported more than 750 kindergartners enrolled. That's a bigger number than we've ever seen, even in the previous big years in the early 90s, when we saw the peak here of enrollment in school. I think at that time we were around 600 kindergarten students. So, there's an awful lot of folks that are coming to town, raising their families, participating in community activities and the like. And so I think it's been a positive thing for them, and I think a positive for our community as well.
One of the reasons I asked is that I was at the post office the other day, and there was a fella who had told me that he had made a strip across the back of his pickup window that said, "Welcome to North Dakota, and now go home." And I thought that was really odd, but he was getting some shouts of approval from passersby, and I thought, what is going on here? But that's not something you've experienced up there, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay. We've been speaking to the Minot City Manager, Mr. Dave Wayne. This is about oil industry impact in western North Dakota and how the state legislature is helping folks to try to deal with that. Thank you for your time, Mr. Wayne.
You bet.
And this has been the Legislature Today radio program. We're sponsored on our hour by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, and we're certainly grateful for their support. We've spoken tonight to the City Mayor of Williston, Mr. Ward Kozer, the Dickinson City Administrator, Sean Kessel, and the gentleman that you were just listening to, the City Manager of Minot, Dave Wayne.
The Legislature Today is brought to you